lead with a genuine message. Come to help. I think people will gain more from being able to be helped at Black Hat than leaving with 50 t-shirts. For the first timer, it's pretty cool to get all that swag. But I think if they leave with something that actually makes sense, I think it's way more meaningful.
Welcome to Audience First, a podcast for tech marketers looking to break out of the echo chamber to better understand their audience and turn them into loyal customers. Every week, Danny Wolf has brutally honest conversations with busy tech buyers about what really motivates them, the things they hate that vendors do, and what you can do about it. Get access to practical information on how to build authentic relationships with your audience. Listen to and talk with your buyers, and apply real customer insights to your strategies and tactics. You owe it to the world to unmute your mic. Are you ready?
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Audience First. We have a special guest today, as always. Welcome to the show, Leo. How are you doing, Leo?
Doing really good. Thanks, Danny.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to have Leo on because I met Leo, 2 weeks ago at Black Hat. That was a lot of fun, by chance, actually. And he had approached our little get-together with the Mr. Roberts at the Mandalay Bay with a nice bottle of whiskey, was it?
That's right. Yeah, 4 roses. Yeah, I had to bring the guy roses.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was really, really great. Tell me a little bit about that kind of experience. We talked about it a little bit before we hit record on this session, right. But why 4 roses? What was the backstory there?
Absolutely. So, as a lot of people know in the industry, Chris Roberts is he's known just for his infamous nature of helping folks. Right. Usually, infamy has a very negative sound to it, but he's a helper. He's a genuine human being. And I remember the first time I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and he commented on the post, and I felt kind of like meeting the Rolling Stones for the first time, or the Beatles. It was kind of like a dream come true. And then, I sent him another message directly, and he responded right away. And then, that happened a couple of years ago. And from then on, we had a relationship over social media and, interacting. And yeah, any question I would throw at him, he would always offer his advice, genuine guidance. And yeah, even if it was him saying like, maybe try something else, this might not be the right path. He'd always offer that up, but then he'd also offer up other folks to follow and talk to and connect those dots. And that's honestly why I was just very excited to meet him in person for the first time. I was hoping to do it a couple of years ago, but now obviously we got hit with a pandemic, and I figured that first time finally in person has to be special. What do you bring? The man, the myth, the legend. You bring him flowers. I found the 4 roses at the liquor store, and I just said, this is perfect. My favorite bourbon of choice is Blanton's bourbon, but it was just I guess it just made sense. I figured it also would make a great social media post on LinkedIn. But yeah, and if it's anyone deserves really good bourbon, it's Chris. It's the least I could do for a lot that he's done for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really touching. And I guess what I'm hearing here is, if you don't ask, you don't get the help. So unmute the mic. Yes. and talk to who inspires you, really, and who you want to learn from. That's one. Ask for the help. There's no shame in that. From security practitioner to security practitioner, from marketer to security practitioner, and marketer to marketer. Second is do your homework and understand what people like. So 4 roses, whiskey. Obviously, Chris is a fanatic. He loves his whiskey. So that's awesome. Love that story. And it was awesome to meet you. How was the show for you, by the way?
It was interesting because it was the first time I was invited to Black Hat to help with the Network Operations Center. And in essence, it's also the Security Operations Center for Black Hat. And I got to see firsthand what goes into, getting the conference up and running, how it comes to fruition. The meaning behind it takes a village is, to say the least. It takes an entire army. And as the NOC was doing the surveillance and ensuring the network was safe, it was up. It was really awesome to see the collective and cohesive nature of all the engineers and analysts work together from different vendors to ensure that, people's information was kept private, secure. The training sessions that went on were, they remained uninterrupted. And at the end of the day, it was really just a learning experience for me. And meeting people that I've never met before was incredible as well. The great conversations, the camaraderie, and at the same time, considering we haven't gotten together in over 2 years, that made it that much more special. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was definitely a very special experience, very interesting experience. Being around so many folks, it was definitely felt weird at first, but then as you kind of met the people that you were used to seeing already, and then new people, and then you see how everything got together, it just felt like normal.
Yeah. How would you kind of differentiate this year's Black Hat versus others that you've been to in the past, apart from, again, you haven't seen people for a couple of years? Mm-hmm. Setting that aside, what do you think was different this time around?
I think everyone was trying to get to know each other again, even from the vendor perspective. I walked the floor probably a dozen times, probably hit up the same booths, twice, if not 3 times. Just to get like different conversations going, and just to learn a little bit more about, the new technologies that are emerging, from VC-backed startups to, tenured vendors that are coming out with new innovations, pioneering new ways for us to continue to safeguard the digital space. It honestly was refreshing. People were really just curious and in that they wanted to understand like how that pandemic impacted us as humans, how we're obviously operationalizing and consuming technology today, but how the pandemic really changed our viewpoint in security, right? Considering the adversaries took advantage of the situation, unfortunately, understanding, just from us, from the human element, like what our new concerns are. Right. What do we actually need? Right. The vendors actually were listening versus trying to sell. Yeah, they were really listening a lot. That's really what the difference was from previous Black Hats. Normally, you go in and you get the swag. You listen to a 15-minute demo or a 5-minute demo. You talk to someone. You get the T-shirt, the sweater, or the figurine. It was definitely more intimate, and because I don't think it was as packed as it used to be. So it definitely allowed for a lot more meaningful conversations to happen.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting that you say that. Now, I cannot differentiate between different years because this was the first time that I've been at Black Hat. So to me, It was swag central. And the only thing missing from the floor was like a T-shirt gun, in my opinion.
Yeah, right.
So I'd love to know, and I'll break it down a little bit because I have loads of questions to unpack here. What, you said you roamed the hall around 12 times. What stood out to you positively?
I think one of the things that was really interesting is vendors tend to stay in their own zone. They don't they don't leave their own zone. And, it's kind of like competition. The cool thing was I started seeing that vendors were kind of like talking to other vendors and like, how are you guys doing? What are you seeing from your clients? What are the trends are you seeing? What are the attacks that are impacting the way your clients purchase, right? The way your clients proof of concept, right? And decide like what they truly need. What are the challenges that they face as well, even with supply chain issues. There was a lot of cohesive conversations going on, which I never saw that before. Vendors were like, you know what? CrowdStrike's there, Cyber Reasons here, Palo Alto's there. We have our own, our own way of doing it. Our way is better. It was different this year. It was completely different. Sometimes I did see 2 startup vendors that competed in the same space in identity, talking to the same client and figuring out like, what makes sense for them based off of third-party integrations or alliances, trying to really learn from the client, like, okay, where are you going? Like, what is the challenge? Is identity the challenge, but, that solution different? Perhaps maybe, the way you handle identity is more policy versus trying to buy a technology. And again, it just goes back to people who are really trying to listen, trying to understand. But it was great to see the vendors communicate that way. And yeah, I mean, in the past, I would honestly, I'd roam the halls, just to get the swag as well. A lot of folks do that. It was, even from my perspective, I really wanted to understand from everyone how the pandemic impacted them, how they're doing, and honestly just learn, like, how do we get better, right? How do we actually start working cohesively, right? Not just talking about technology integrations and APIs, like really working towards benefiting the world, right? I mean, the adversarial attacks are just getting worse, and we have to stop competing at some point and understand that everyone can potentially use every technology, but us as the humans, the most vital resource is what's important, right? And that's what I tend to lead with as well, is that whether I was working for a vendor or not, if someone's asking me for help, I'm going to figure out how to help them from the human element first. It may not be the technology I'm selling. It might be, my colleague who's been in, governance, risk, and compliance for 20 years, and he may be able to, or she may be able to just go in and say, you know what, let me help you with documentation. Let me save you a year's worth of work. Let's get you where you need to be. That's honestly what stood out the most and what was really awesome about Black Hat this year.
Let's flip it on its head, though, because this is where the juicy stuff comes out.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what are some cardinal rules vendors broke in your eyes this year at Black Hat?
That is an interesting question. I'd probably, some of the vendors, and not just startups, and some of the more tenured vendors, they were they still had to sell, right? And they were, some of them were kind of like pushy. Maybe the folks were new to Black Hat, from the marketing and sales perspective. So they were more inclined to do their roles. Like, listen, if you're talking to someone, try to give them the pitch, try to reel them in, trying to secure the next meeting. Pull someone else into the conversation. If you get them for 30 seconds, don't let them go, right? Like, try to hold on to them. So I think that's one of the rules. It's that, if someone says, you know what, I'll look at your information, or, I'll look into it. Or, if someone looks at you and says, hey, you want a free t-shirt? And like, I'll come back for one. I already have another one. Getting flagged down and chased after is definitely, one of the rules, and trying to get the conversation to keep going when the person doesn't want to. You can tell that they're kind of like, I already told you no, in a very nice way. Like, I could always look it up, and, some people were like, hey, have you heard of us? Like, I have, and they ask how, they try to reel you in. Those are just some of the rules that I feel were broken, where although there was intimacy and there were good conversations, they still try to really, flag people down and try to sell them on the spot, which, again, it's Black Hat. It's going to happen. You have sales folks on the floor. It's natural at that point, but there comes a time where you have to respect the boundary, right? I myself, I was flagged down by someone after I spoke to someone for like 2 seconds, like, hey, have you heard of us? I said, no, actually, no, but do you have a card? Do you have a document? And it was just in the hall, and like in the middle of the vendor booths. It wasn't actually at a vendor booth. It's just in the common walk space. Mm-hmm. And as soon as that person walked away, someone came running and said, hey, I just saw you spoke to my colleague. So, like, since you haven't heard of us, can I tell you a little bit about it? And me and one of my friends that we were working the knock, we actually had to be somewhere, and she was following us the whole way. And, we were like, you know what, you got a job to do. We get it. It's cool. It's going to take us at least 3 minutes to get to the exit because it's so massive. Go ahead, give us the pitch, tell us the why, where you guys were founded, why you were founded, what you're trying to fix. But still, right. It's just, it's one of those rules. It's like, you just let people be.
It's no longer the elevator pitch. It's the walk the hall pitch.
Yeah, I know at that point. Yeah.
All right. I love that. I want to go back to your comment about more listening. There are more conversations happening. Let's unpack that a little bit. Let's unravel it a little bit. How does that kind of look like? What specifically, in your opinion, does that look like? Can you give me some concrete examples of how those things are different than previous years?
Yeah. So one prime example, I actually ran into a previous client that I used to handle from a security architecture perspective. And they were trying to pick my brain, like, hey, you're here, let's walk the hall together. Let me know like what vendors I should probably be talking to, which ones to avoid. And that last sentence there, like which ones to avoid, I stopped him and I said, I'm like, you know what? Don't avoid anyone. You never know which one of these niche vendors, the startup vendors that, just have maybe no backing, maybe they're privately funded, are actually going to come out with something that's going to impact humanity for the greater good. Talk to as many folks as you can. And it just happened that I had met someone maybe a few hours ago by accident. And we ran into each other in the hallway, and they were actually worked as a director of vulnerability management for a security startup. And that conversation, started to unfold on the show floor of what have you done over the last 15, 20 years in your career? Because my colleague who I was walking the halls with is a CISO for quite some time, and it was great to see that person from the startup really try to figure out what they've done in the industry, what's been their long lasting impact, what do they want to be known for as well, aside from securing an organization, helping to safeguard an organization's data assets, all this stuff under the sun. What else do they want to do, right, for the industry, for the community? And that's where the CISO is like, you know what, that's awesome that you mentioned community, because that's the next part of my life that I really want to focus on. In that 20 years ago, I wasn't where I was, and he said, he's like, Leo, like 10, 15 years ago, he wasn't where he was, right? A lot of us weren't. It's really trying to figure out how do we bring up the future race, the future generations, to potentially fix what we couldn't, right? Maybe fill the gaps of zero trust, maybe come out with a new framework that actually makes sense for all the industries. Maybe bring together vendors that once competed into a full alliance where they're not competing anymore. And it's kind of like a la carte, he called it. He was like, not to say that everything would be, he mentioned like under Google, but more of like, what, if you're going to leverage us, you should at least leverage this competitor for these two other areas of security. And that's what he was really trying to focus on, the community, right? How do we bring about new generations the right way? And also, how does he talk to vendors to have them understand you guys need to work together? Even if you're a firewall to firewall, there's other solutions that you sell. Figure out how you can work together for the greater benefit of the customer, right? Don't go competing. Ask the CISO, ask the SOC lead, ask the engineers, ask everyone, what do you want, right? What is it that you truly want out of, the technology, aside from solving, we don't have MFA. So those conversations, like that, we were on the floor for probably maybe standing for 30, 40 minutes. My feet were killing me from all the walking, but those are the conversations that were great. And then one of my colleagues, walked over that was working the NOC. I was texting them and I'm like, hey, come over here. You should talk to this guy. And after that, they stayed in touch, and there were other folks having the same type of conversations. And I love that. I think we need to have more of that, where we're just discussing what hasn't worked, being completely open and candid, and understanding that in order for us to actually fix a lot of problems in the industry, we need to look at ourselves and say, you know what, a 25-year-old that just graduated college, who's working in a SOC, a NOC, or startup vendor, whether they're in, engineering, pre-sales, marketing, trying to get into lead, no matter what, if they're not shown the right path and the right way to analyze and think, they're going to fall into potentially the same issues, that some of us have fallen, where it's like, I don't like that vendor, I don't like them just because of X, and I love this vendor because of marketing, or, for certain reasons, right? We need to change that, because even us as evaluators, when we're picking a vendor, we need to be open-minded, right? But again, we have to our earlier point, what you mentioned, it's understanding how vendors can change the way they, market, the way they sell.
I love that. That to me is the highlight of this episode. I love that line right there. We're going to lead with that line on the trailer. That's awesome. I do want to get your input and understand if there are any kind of booths or vendors that stood out to you at the show that you said, okay, wow, I gotta keep this in the Rolodex or in my back pocket for potential conversation.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? As soon as you walked in, you obviously saw the vendors that had the most budget. You had like the massive, statues of like I think it was
superheroes,
Cyber Reason or CrowdStrike. One of them.
Yeah, it was CrowdStrike. Yeah,
CrowdStrike. Yeah, they had like a massive area. They were giving out hoodies, and they had the Transformer type figurines. Cyber Reason as well. They had a huge presence. I think it was Sentinel One. They had what looked like a purple tree of life, which was really awesome. That stuff is catchy because you got to look at it one of two ways. They're probably, they probably are trying to get your attention for a valid reason, not so much like, hey, we're flashy. We just want to bring you in and get you the free swag and talk to us. You never know. It might make sense, but the vendors that stood out to me were the I don't know if they're nonprofit, but there were a few vendors that deal in threat intelligence. That they consume threat intelligence from a lot of different parties, whether it's vendor, whether it's private, whether it's a nonprofit. And what they do is at that point they feed federal government agencies, right, so that they can respond and they can analyze it and sanitize and realize, like, you know what, this is a credible threat. I thought that was really interesting. That was actually by the Career Zone, which I was surprised. Yeah,
the Innovation City over there.
Yes, yeah. I forget their name, but I have like, I think, I don't know, like a whole bag full of business cards and stickers of vendors that I definitely have to go through and siphon through. That really stood out because a lot of the smaller ones, they had a very similar message in that, what, we are breaking into the industry because we want to change the norm, right? We don't just want to sell. We want to offer up a service, a service that's going to genuinely help someone, right? Versus, hey, here's the latest SIM tool. Our SIM tool, although is only a year old, can do so much more than, one of the more tenured vendors like Splunk, right? Or Datadog. We're seeing a lot of that, right? We're seeing a lot of those niche startups, in the endpoint space, XDR space, security automation orchestration come out. Maybe because they want to get acquired, by the bigger guys, or maybe they truly have something that completely differentiates them altogether. But it's the small vendors that lead with, we're not really selling a technology, we're selling a service, right? A service that can help the human being, become that much more efficient in their role. And those are the vendors that honestly, like, I was really interested in talking to. Some of them just dealt in, the governance, risk, and compliance space. Some of them dealt in threat intelligence. Some of them, did CISO advisory services, which is another important like area and topic of adding value. Because as a newly minted CISO of a school system myself, I was very, very candid with the school system, not to go on a sidetrack, but I can't do what you expect me to do based off of someone who has 25 years experience, right? Although I do have the experience to get the role, I need help. So what am I going to do? I'm going to actually reach out to some of those vendors and say, hey, you do, continuous monitoring on compliance. Oh, you know what? And you do it, you handle it completely. And it's pretty cost effective. Let's talk. Someone else does, identity access management, again, continuous monitoring, continuous posture, no agent, very, very simple. It's all outsourced. Okay, you know what? That alleviates me of certain concerns and certain risks. So it's finding the people that can do the service versus finding a technology that tells me, you install this on an endpoint, we're going to do everything right for you, right? Because that doesn't give me, although the technology is a tangible technology, it doesn't give me, really anything that I'm looking to solve long-term at the end of the day.
How many tools, services, or solutions from vendors did you kind of pull away from the show over in your goodie bag of cards?
Oh, a lot. Yeah. From, what's interesting, XDR is like the big buzzword, extended detection and response everywhere. The acronym stands for a lot of different things. There's a lot of vendors out there that, whether they do identity access management or they do SIM, they do endpoint security. I don't know, like network access control. What's the other one? Dark web monitoring. Like a lot of them, they all had an XDR like tag to it as well, right? And I was kind of like, why? Like, are you just trying to add that XDR so that you say you have it as a feature and tool set, right? So that you meet like a check mark, because that's not a good thing, right? Because if someone comes at you and says like, oh, you offer XDR, you can do everything across the spectrum, right? Digital forensics, incident response, static dynamic malware analysis on the endpoint across Windows, Mac, Linux, they're going to be like, no, well, we do pieces of it. And like, well, then you don't do the full XDR perspective, right? So then you kind of have to move yourself away from that bucket or quadrant, right? So a lot of vendors as well, like I found, hurt themselves in their messaging marketing because they were trying to compete too much with the bigger guys, and they're trying to compete with everyone that's like, what's going to be the message? Cyber resilience, XDR, and we automate everything. But then you talk to them and it's like, but you don't.
So that's a good point. So at what point would it be okay to use buzzwords? Because you have to use buzzwords in some instances, right? So to your point, one is if you actually do it to the full extent, what would be other reasons?
I mean, if someone comes at me and says, listen, we do offer XDR, but it's traditional, right? It's digital forensics, incident response, right? For the endpoint. And from there, if they start talking about like, listen, if you're infected, if you're compromised, right, we're going to look at operating system level forensics. We're going to look at file system level forensics. They're going to go granular. They're going to go deep. That information, they said, we're going to be able to give it to you. But what we're going to do at the same time is correlated with network telemetry that we're collecting from a lot of different areas, not ourselves, not just our sensors, but integrations we have with Cisco or Juniper, Palo Alto, or Aruba. All the vendors, we'll be able to digest and absorb that information and figure out the timeline, of when it really happened. Then at that point, if they understand what the buzzword of XDR means, and they give me all those nuggets, I know what they're talking about. I know at the end of the day, they're focused on really getting the valuable intel so that I can obtain attribution and closure of, I know who it was. I know that, this wasn't just a pass-by attack. I was probably targeted, or even worse, a user within my organization was targeted, which means they were profiled, they were social engineered somehow, and that might be a bigger threat. If they can answer those questions for me, at that point, I will listen to their XDR pitch. At that point, that buzzword becomes a reality, right? You are operationalizing XDR, but at the same time, I can educate them in saying that there's so much more that you're doing. I get you're leading with the XDR message and the marketing, but it's awesome that that they understand like what's really behind it. And I think vendors have to really know that if they're leading with the buzzword, they need to also be genuine from behind that buzzword, right? Mm-hmm. Come at me with XDR, come at me with SOAR, come at me with cyber resilience. That's fine. I get it. But then give me, the meat and potatoes behind it, right? What it really means, right? And at that point, if I do adopt, the message, if I do adopt the technology and I implement it and I'm a champion for it, the outcome that they want, of course, is like, do I become a referenceable customer, right? And then I state, I chose this vendor because their XDR story was, XYZ, all what I mentioned, like everything that's behind it, right? And yes, I'll be on paper saying like, XDR, but there's a reason why I chose that XDR message. And I think vendors just have to change the way they lead with buzzwords. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So you have your handy dandy bag of business cards. How do you sort the wheat from the chaff?
Okay. Yeah. So what I do is I look at them, I'll Google, the vendor, and I also Google the individual that gave you the business card. Oftentimes they're in sales. For the small startups, I actually got a couple where it was the CEO and founder or the COO. who are actually doing both roles. They're both the salesperson and the technical person, which is interesting. It was really cool to see. And actually, I think one of them was at the little meet and greet we did at Riff Raffs. I met a bunch, obviously, on the floor. But what I'll do is I'll siphon through them and I'll say, you know what? Okay, after I've ranked them based off of like specific need, like industry sectors, identity access management, vulnerability management, XDR, SOAR, forensics, whatever it might be. I'll place them in those buckets. The people that are on the business cards, I'll look them up. I'll see where they are in the industry as well, what their messaging is. Do they have webinars on YouTube? Are they on Collateral? Let me see what they're leading with. Let me see if I could find them already doing other pitches, other talks, to save them time as well. Because if I reach out, I don't want to ask them the same questions that I would be able to learn from on their data sheet or the website or a YouTube video that they posted if they presented at RSA as an example, right? I want to be able to kind of save them the time as well if I had to reach out. So that's kind of how I do it. At the same time, I'd focus on what I'm trying to acquire, right? Like for the school system I work with, I'd look at the 3 biggest areas that I know like potentially are at the moment risky for us and that we have to fill the gaps on, and look through some of those vendors and see, let's see which one of these actually makes sense for us, right? Let me, that's why I'm going to look at all the collateral. And at that point, I'll pick 2, I'll pick 2. I won't really go crazy and pick 3 or 4, because I don't want to open up, like too many conversations and maybe give a vendor false hope. I'd rather have, 2 conversations. And if those 2 don't end up being, in my benefit, that I see a value, then I'll choose the other 2 potentially that I didn't choose prior, right? At that point. So this way it's not wasting anyone's time at that point. Yeah.
Does the outreach post show irk you or help you?
Yeah. Oh, when they say like, hey, thanks for stopping by the booth, or hey, thanks for stopping at our happy hour. It doesn't, to be honest. Is in the email. Well, here's the thing. Depending on the email that they send, it may or may not help, because sometimes in some of those emails, it's just a thank you, right? Thanks for stopping by. Here's some links to our information. Hope we talk to you soon. I prefer them to, and I know they get a lot of people, but I prefer them to research the folks that they're reaching out to. If they really want to do business with the folks, don't just send a mass mailer that 1,000 people are going to get, right? Customize it, right? Make it specific to that individual. That something, mention something that'll resonate. If you spoke to someone at that happy hour, right? Like if I went to a vendor happy hour actually on the first night, and I signed up right there, and they're like, oh, you know what? Oh, it's awesome. You're with a nonprofit school system that focuses on kids that are deaf and autistic. There's someone that we need to get to talk to you. Had they gone that direction, and that person, spoke to me, I would hope that they remembered, right? So then when they send that email, maybe they tailor it towards me. They need to do that, even if they do cite, if they do get 1,000 folks, there's only so many people that they're actually going to talk to. So those are the folks that they have to remember. And if that person that they spoke to gets that generic email, that person most likely is just going to be like, you know what, it's, they're not trying, or if it was worth their time as well, they would have tried to like look me up a little bit more. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is there etiquette 101 for any cybersecurity marketer and seller that they should follow for next year's Black Hat? Like a stepped checklist, in your opinion, that you'd like to share as best practice?
You know what? There was one vendor that I won't name to remain unbiased, because I do give them credit, but they had their marketing all over the place. They have them in airports, and they had them at Black Hat, and they were leading with 100% prevention. And I'm just like, there was a lot of people that I'd walk by that sign with, and we'd always look, or we'd like point like, 100% prevention. And it's catchy at that point, right? You get a lot of people, heads to turn. but nothing is 100%. We know that, and I think that's just more, maybe it's a good marketing trick where we approach them and say 100% prevention, huh? Well, hold on. Let me tell you why we went with that story, 100% prevention. And maybe it's for that. Maybe it's, it's to reel you in. But I feel like the marketing team needs to be more genuine. Right? If you're going to want to reel people in, lead with a genuine story, right? Heck, if I saw a vendor that said, we're just going to be honest with you, it's 50-50, I'd take that conversation. What made you say 50-50? Because it's going to happen either way. But what at that point, what made you say, like, do you have statistics? Do you yourselves, did you go based off of maybe your own clients, that were impacted by a threat, that you maybe might be able to disclose? I don't know. But I think going into the next Black Hat and future Black Hats, marketing has to change. And it starts with listening to the people. They should actually reach out to their clients. Like, what would you like to see us do at Black Hat? Not, hey guys, Palo Alto's leading with this message, or Cisco's leading with that message, Microsoft's leading with this. And it's like now 100 vendors are like, they're always on the news. They're on Money Talks, or we need to go with that. No, you don't. No, you don't. If anything, maybe not to say compete with it, but demystify it. Like, if they're leading with that, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's getting the stock market, for them up, who knows, whatever it is. Just lead with a genuine message, like come to help. I think people will gain more from being able to be helped at Black Hat than leaving with 50 t-shirts. For the first timer, it's pretty cool to get all that swag. But I think if they leave with something that actually makes sense, I think it's way more meaningful. But at some point, Black Hat Vegas, it just gets taxing. We go there to kind of just, completely reboot our brains. That's why we call it Hacker Summer Camp. But if we turn it into a meaningful conference where people can have genuine conversations and learn from each other at vendor booths, at that point, I think it'd be awesome. Heck, I mean, I would ask vendors to ask their own clients, like, listen, we'll get you guys out of Black Hat. Let's put you in conversation with like 5 other CISOs. Let's have like a fireside chat, just completely candid, and tell us like some of the things where you love and you kind of think we should do better, so that people learn from it, because if they are looking at us, they can learn from you on how to operationalize better. It's just got to be genuine. No one's perfect. Yeah. So yeah.
I rest my case.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said it all. I almost feel like, after hearing this and after, roaming the floors 13 times, the pre-show play is huge.
Yeah.
For marketing teams and salespeople. I mean, you have to get those conversations going so that they're set up at the show, because, it's a shit show on the floor. You have, people running around like chickens with their heads cut off for swag and for all this kind of stuff, for scanning badges. But really the pre-show game is huge. So you can getting the right conversations at the show and extracting that genuine conversation, to your point. And you raised some interesting insights regarding strategy at the show, how to approach the booth, how to approach the conversations, how to approach the engagement. This has been absolutely awesome. We went actually totally off track from what I originally wanted to do, which I love. We dug into the Black Hat experience. We didn't actually go into what you do. So Mr. Leo Cruz, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And why the hell do you do it?
So it's an awesome, I have an interesting, journey just in general into the tech industry. So I'll start from where I am at the moment. At the moment, I am a CISO advisor for a school system, St. Joseph School for the Deaf here in New York, that focuses on educating kids K through 8. In addition, we also have affiliations with high schools we focus on kids that are deaf, but some of them are also autistic, special needs. And at the same time, I'm also an advisor architect for Cisco. And I do sit on a couple boards across the education space and vendor agnostic space, just to give back to the community. Honestly, as I mentioned before, Chris has done this for me. A lot of folks have done this for me in mentorship, and offering thought leadership and insight. I want to do the same for future generations. So, every day, although I have my day job and I'm an advisor, architect, and I work across New York City public sector agencies, school systems, it's really about giving back. That's really what I focus on every day. If I'm positioning a technology, if I'm in a CISO roundtable, it's just offering my candid feedback based off of previous experiences, and the expertise that I have, and sometimes even talking about failures, right? So that folks understand, like, what, don't do this. Like, honestly, I've gone through it, avoid it at all costs, and go down the other path. And what I love about what I do every day is that you just don't know what conversation you're going to have tomorrow with your colleagues and friends, but you do know that you can at least give them something. So every day I wake up and I figure out, like, what don't I know well, what don't I know yet, and I'll ask someone, like, hey, you know what, I want to research this, what do you think? At the same time, I'll think back to someone that wanted something, that wanted to learn something, and I'll reach out to them, like, hey, you know what, you mentioned like a month ago you wanted to learn about malware, let's get into it. Now that I know how to set up a sandbox, do the static and dynamic analysis, and I can train someone in it, I want to give back. But I wasn't always, I still don't consider myself a subject matter expert. Call it imposter syndrome, but I wasn't always where I am today. I don't have a college degree yet. I'm graduating this Friday from Champlain College, and I'm getting my formal bachelor's in cybersecurity and forensics. And I'm proud to say that, I did it in just under 2 years, 4 years and under 2 years, while holding, a couple roles, starting a nonprofit, becoming a father. She's now 4 months old, our baby girl. So yeah, I put a lot on myself over the last 2 years, and I'm happy to say that I've accomplished that. But my journey started about 15 years ago or so. I forget how old I am, but I'm a lot older than I look. But I started playing games online, and a lot of my friends here growing up in New York City were big, nerds, techies. You'd throw LAN parties. And from there, we'd go to internet cafes. Their older brothers were all into tech, back in like the late 90s, 1998, 99, .com era. They were going to college. We were still like, really young, like 13, 14. And we would look up to them, and we'd want to play video games with them. And at some point we were just like, what, we can actually compete. So we started, signing up for competitions, and we started winning, and it was really fun. Sometimes we get like a free mouse, from like a vendor or keyboard or something, or prize money. And at that point, I had learned appreciation for networking, the internet, but I just didn't think that I can turn it into a career. I have no idea why. And I didn't know why then. I know why now. It's because I didn't have the right people at the right time, right? And I'll remember that, because I'll bring that back in conversation in just a bit. And when I went to school for pre-med, changed my major to finance, changed my major to accounting, changed my major to engineering. And then eventually I was like, you know what? My parents wanted to kill me, because they're like, dude, like, come on.
Make up your mind.
You make up your mind. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go straight into the workforce, as a help desk technician, level 1 sysadmin. I know how to do this stuff. So let me just start making some money, saving up. And then from there, I started to meet the people that, guided me in the right direction. They're like, dude, you have a knack for this. You love this stuff. Your curiosity makes you that much more effective and efficient. Let us help you, and then, long story short, 10, 12 years later, meeting the right people, guiding me through all my roles, making sure that, if I wanted to learn something new, I learned it. If I made a mistake, they didn't, reprimand me and say, like, don't, like, oh, what did you do? Don't do that again. The PG version. More so, let me show you, what you should have done, right? Like rebuilding an Exchange server. I probably forgot to do. I remember I did it once, long time ago, when Exchange servers were always on-prem, and I messed something up with the data store. And long story short, it ended up good, but it didn't end up good for the first 12 hours. No one's email was accessible. People lost all their email just for a short duration of time. But yeah, things like that. But the right, what I mentioned before, the right people just weren't in my life at the right time. When they became, the right people during the right time is where I became the Leo you see today, who I to some, they think that I'm an extrovert, not complete introvert. There's just times where I know how to turn it on so that I can speak to someone, so I can give back. But I wasn't like this always. My first tech talk was actually coming up on 6 years. It was actually at a Star Wars movie premiere. And I was very nervous. As a first tech talk, there was probably like 250 people in the theater. And, here I am, like a 28-year-old. I'm like, what the heck? Like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But it was one person who believed in me. And he said, just do it. If you're not going to do it now, you're never going to do it, man. And whether you speak in front of 10 people or 250 people, it makes no difference.
Yeah.
Just tell them the story that you want to tell them. Be genuine, right? Don't worry about what the messaging for marketing has to be. Put your own message in it. And that resonated with me. But they're giving me the slides. He's like, it doesn't matter. You tell your story. You get up there and tell your story. I'm going to be up there every step of the way. And yeah, from gamer, to nerd, rising up the ranks from help desk technician, sysadmin, having various roles. Eventually I was like, I love security. I want to do this. And then the right people pushed me and mentored me and guided me. And it's why I want to give back to the community. And it's why I focus on, the education sector so much, because I get like a motto, it's not even like branded or anything or trademarked. It's more so, if we give kids and even adults that are trying to break into the industry, today, a beautiful experience from the very beginning, a motivational experience and a positive experience, they're going to feel empowered and confident that I can do this. And like, yeah, you can. Like, absolutely. Like, even if you're 50 years old or 10 years old or 25 years old, regardless, you want to get into cybersecurity, we will help you. The helpers are out there. And Mr. Rogers said, look to the helpers. They're always out there. There's a lot of those things influence my life. And it's why, I do what I do. To me, I don't want to be known for inventing a technology or taking a startup to unicorn status. I just want to be known for being an amazing father and husband, and just giving back, because I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the people that helped me and pulled me up. And that's where everything has to change, across the vendor space.
Yeah. So meaningful. We're heading towards the end of the session, top of the hour almost. Leo, is there anything else you want to impart on the audience today before we sign off?
Honestly, I just tell everyone to just admire and love the small things in life, right? Like what we do 9 to 5, it puts food on the table. It allows us to buy what we want to buy. Like for me, one of my vices is Funko Pops. You can't see them, but I have a ton of like comic book collections. But yeah, just remember the little things in life. They matter the most at the end of the day. You could always have the ability to help someone. Don't think that you don't. Right? And it's why we're in this. Yep.
100%. I love that. This has been absolutely awesome. And again, congrats on the degree and more, in my opinion, more importantly, your daughter. That's awesome. We spoke about her at the show. So Leo, it has been a pleasure. Thanks again for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Danny. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Audience First. If you like what you've heard, feel free to follow or subscribe to Audience First on Apple, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast streamers.